I'm going to share right now about a conversation that I had with a Mayan priest. And this was back in 2011. So it was before the 2012 Mayan calendar shift. And he was telling me about what it meant, what the change of the calendar meant. And the first thing that he said was that a lot of people were talking about it being the end of the world. The way he described it was like at the end of the calendar of the year, say December 31st to January 1st, the world doesn't end. It's just the demarcation of a period of time, ending and beginning. And he was saying that the shift in the calendar had a few different themes associated with it that we were going to see in the coming years, but that it wasn't the kind of thing that would change overnight, but rather it was the point where the polarity would start to shift. And so he mentioned three specific themes, and there might be more, but these were the three that he shared with me. So the first theme that he talked about was about the shift in masculine dominated energy to more feminine dominated energy. And this does not mean just strictly men being in power to women being in power, but more like the masculine way of being, which includes things like a forceful and exploratory, outward facing kind of way of leading and living. And, realizing that it has its place and it had its time period where that was the dominant way of being, and it serves a purpose for a period of time. And then the shift going to more of a feminine energy, which is more about being softer and gentle, yet strong and powerful in that gentleness, receptiveness and openness and expansiveness in the receptivity, not in the outward facing way, but more in the opening up to be able to receive more. There has been a huge shift in a lot of areas of life and in the world. I think that in looking at these energetic shifts with the masculine to feminine dominated energies, I think it's important to realize that it's not about judging either one as better or worse, but more just watching the dance of life as it flows through different seasons. In the same way that, you watch nature and you see that in spring, that's when the plants are outward facing, their buds are growing, their flowers are opening, and that's a very different time versus when autumn comes and it's a time of releasing and letting go of leaves, letting go of what doesn't serve. And it's not that you can objectively say that either one is important or better or worse, but rather it's just part of the flow of life. I don't know what in terms of astronomy is happening or has been happening that signifies that shift, in the same way that with the seasons, the reason that we have 4 seasons, if you live in a place where there are 4 seasons, is just because of the elliptical pattern that the earth goes around the sun, and also the tilt. But it's happening because of something very tangible for it. And if somebody has an explanation for that, for why the Mayan calendar has several energetic shifts, I would love to hear about that. The second theme, which the Mayan priest told me would happen at the Mayan calendar change in 2012, is that we would also be going from more modern culture to indigenous roots. To me, that's sort of also related to the sense of outward facing sort of exploration versus the return home, the coming back to our roots. And, indigenous culture exists everywhere in the world. It's not just with, say, Native Americans, literally all over the world, even in Europe, there are indigenous roots and cultures. To look at what is that really about, and what does that really mean for you to come back to indigenous roots and memories. And for me, I didn't expect that I would move to Peru back in 2015. But in the last 5 years, I've seen that happen so much, not just for myself, but for many people who come from all around the world to go to Peru because they're looking for some sort of spiritual connection to something that they don't even know exactly what they're looking for. But usually it's just some knowing that is really woven into a lot of indigenous culture. And indigenous culture is really vague because there are so many different cultures, even within Peru. There are indigenous cultures that are from the jungle. There are some that are from the mountains and the Andes, and even within those places, there's even subculture groups. There are even smaller cultural groups that are unique and have their own languages or dialects, and also different practices and ways of working spiritually and energetically. There was a shaman, which is not exactly the right term, but it's a term that he used because it's the closest to what he could come up with in terms of translating that word. This Peruvian shaman told me the story about how basically there were, if you imagine just one family sitting around a fire, and every night they come back to this fire, and that's just what they do. Day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. But there was a point in time where certain members of this family decided that they would go wander off to see what is out there in the world, knowing that one day they would come back. And so they went off on this long journey. Now, or in recent years, is a time where a lot of people who have gone, or souls who have gone far, far away, are starting to come back and are starting to be called to come back into these circles, to come back into their roots, to their families, to the original circle, the original family. And that there are those who stayed by the fire this whole time, waiting, knowing that they would come back. To me, that reminds me of a lot of indigenous practices and cultures that I have connected with and sat in ceremony with, sat in circle with, sat around a fire with. And then there are people who are from more of a Western culture who want to come back too. The way I see it is that there are a lot of cultures and people, shamans, spiritual leaders who I have met and encountered in the last several years. And they have such a wealth of knowledge spiritually, energetically, which a lot of people from the Western world or super modern culture have lost. And for example, when I facilitate retreats, like plant medicine retreats or ayahuasca retreats. So one of the shamans that I worked with, she explained it really well. And she said that a lot of the people that were coming, the extranjeros, the retreat participants that came from all over the world, from Europe, US, Asia, all over. And they would come, and she said that they were like babies, like preschoolers trying to walk. And because they've been so disconnected from the spiritual roots, it's like they forgot how to walk. And so she explains it like that when deep in the ceremony, where for her, because she's done so much training, and it's just embedded in the culture and the everyday life, that it's a lot easier to be able to navigate through that she sees all these people that come from the more modern world as like little babies just trying to walk around, and they can hardly even put one foot in front of the other. And I've seen it like that, where in the modern world, there's so much advancement in terms of technology, writing systems, all sorts of systems that exist in the modern world that makes our lives easier. Yet spiritually, it's been almost totally depleted. where when they come to a place where, or in a space where spirituality is the life. And you can see the difference in that the modern world has put a lot of value in terms of intellectual prowess and technology and many advancements in our society and systems and thought processes and things that are very mind oriented. And then you can compare it to a lot of indigenous cultures where there's this richness of this knowledge of spiritual wisdom that is just unmatched in either world. So what the Mayan priest was talking about was about valuing the things that have been forgotten, that have remained and been retained in many indigenous cultures. I've witnessed such an advancement, an advanced understanding, comprehension, and even, you might even use the word technology, of understanding the spiritual realm and how to navigate through it and how to work with it, that from this perspective, if you value this, then a lot of the modern advancements seem just so sort of empty in a way. But so I've seen, and it's probably because of where I have been based, but I have seen a huge shift in the desire for people, including myself, wanting to learn more about certain indigenous practices and cultures. I have learned so much through, for example, the Q'ero Nation in the Andes of Peru. I have learned some Shipibo ways of working with medicine, the Yamanawa, there's many different cultures that exist, which I have learned so much that I can't even put into words, because it's a wisdom and knowing and technology which is, it's unmatched. It's unmatched in the modern world. And yeah, many people come from all over the world because they're seeking that. They're seeking that again. And for so long, a lot of indigenous people all over the world have really been shat on. I mean, with a lot of colonization, many indigenous people lost their rights, lost their land, lost so much. But I'm seeing this wave, this resurgence of valuing indigenous cultures all over the world, all over. I keep seeing headline after headline of positive news. I mean, there's still a lot of work to do in terms of reconciling what has happened in the past. But I am so grateful to see so much happening that is towards valuing indigenous cultures all over the world. There was a huge ruling in Oklahoma where the Native people were able to claim land. In Canada, the Tla'amin Nation got their land back after over 100 years or so of fighting for it. In Australia, in Japan, it was the first time that they have been recognized, and it's just amazing to see that the wisdom that has been retained in many indigenous cultures is being recognized. And it's time for those of us who have strayed, who have gone to explore, to start to come back, to remember the roots that actually I believe we all have. And it's not about fighting, and there might be difficult emotions that come up for everybody in the process of remembering. And there might be resentments because there were some very hurtful things that have happened for many generations. But I do believe that we're all actually just one family, and there's nowhere else to go but to the direction of unity. So, I think as long as we want to take to come back to that union is sort of up to us. But I'm happy to see that we're remembering some of our roots, some things that have been really important to us that many of us have forgotten. So The third thing that the Mayan priest had mentioned to me about the 2012 Mayan calendar shift is that the power would be going from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere. And when he said that, I just was like, wow, I had not even considered that. When you look at the major cities and where the major power players are, it's mostly in the northern hemisphere. And I don't know exactly what it means for the power to go from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere. Some people have said that the poles are shifting, the north to the south pole. Again, this might be some astronomical event that I'm not aware of or that many people aren't aware of. But if there is some big shift that's happening in terms of magnetic poles, then that might have something to do with it. And I have read several articles talking about how quickly the North Pole has been shifting. And if it's related to this, then that would explain it. So the three things that the Mayan priest told me would be happening in the 2012 calendar shift, I have seen happening. It's little by little. As he said, it wasn't going to be an overnight sudden shift, but more of a gradual change. But I'm seeing these things happening, and I just thought that I would share this in case this is useful for anybody. And if this information can be useful for anybody, that would make me so happy. I believe there's a reason that I encountered this man and that he shared this information with me. And I think that this might help to connect some of the dots, because there are many things that are somewhat unexplained, or some shifts that are happening that people might not understand. And maybe there are other people who have different pieces to the puzzle that can help make this all make sense in a more complete way. So if you have any thoughts about any of these things, please drop it in the comments, and go ahead and follow, like, share, all the good things that people do. Thanks so much. Bye for now.